Good afternoon. Once a vital stop on the Silk Road, Bukhara is charting a new course, this time through contemporary art. From September 5th to November 20th this year, the city will host the inaugural Bukhara Biennial, the first major international art event of its kind in Central Asia. Commissioned by the Uzbekistan Art and Culture Development Foundation, the biennial brings together heritage and experimentation. All works will be created in the country, many in collaboration with master artisans. Staged across centuries-old madrasas and anchored in a theme of heartbreak and healing, the biennial is as much about place as it is about art. It also marks the launch of the new cultural district, a long-term initiative led by Commissioner Gayane Umerova to revitalize Bukhara's historic core. Part of a broader master plan, the district will grow to include artist studios, a music school, a digital archive, and an exhibition space inside the restored 1920s water tower, placing culture at the heart of the city's future. And to explore this vision and its impact, we're joined by the three key figures shaping the new platform. Gayane Umerova, to my left, is the commissioner of the Bukhara Biennial and chairperson of Uzbekistan's Art and Culture Development Foundation. She is the architect of Uzbekistan's national cultural strategy and is leading several major initiatives, including the biennial and the creation of Bukhara's new cultural district. To her left is Diana Campbell, curator of the 2025 Bukhara Biennial and head of global initiatives at the Hartwig Art Foundation. She's known for site-specific projects that merge deep research with local collaboration. And finally, Antony Gormley, internationally celebrated British sculptor whose work explores the human body in space. His participation in the biennial brings a new material dialogue between Bukhara's history and contemporary form. Welcome.
Thank you.
My first question is to you, Gayane. The Bukhara Biennial arrives at a moment of renewed cultural confidence in Central Asia. So what sets this event apart from the other biennials, not just in terms of geography, but also in terms of spirit and curatorial intent?
Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you so much for having us, to you and Achilles. It feels great to be here and to be able to talk about the Bukhara Biennial just a few months prior to the opening. So to start with, when we was exploring the idea how to revive Bukhara's spirit and to work with, at the moment, abundant architectural masterpieces of the past, abundant mosque, madrasa, caravanserai. It felt very natural, to be working with the contemporary art and to be bringing the artists from the world, but also working with the local masters, with the local artisans, because Bukhara, by figures, in Uzbekistan has the biggest amount of artisans, and working in a different medias. So it felt very natural that we should create this collaboration between the world-renowned artists, of course, but also to energize the local community, to work with the local artisans, with the young artists in Uzbekistan. We have a very young generation that would be inspired by the international community coming to the country. So it felt very natural to do this project all together, but also at the same time, it was important to create a master plan of the city and of the historical city. We quickly realized that working throughout the biennial, we can really revive the spirit of the city, bring it to the local communities. And what is so essential and special about Bukhara, there is a breed of people who are into arts as a city of a pilgrimage, as a city that was rooted in the Silk Road. They still have this intellectual part, which is rooted in the country, in the city, and it just needs to be revived with the great help of the curators and of artists.
Speaking of Uzbekistan's heritage, I think it's deeply embedded, if I understand this correctly, in this compelling title that you have given to the biennial, Recipe for Broken Hearts.
What's the story behind it, Diana? And why now?
Yes, so, of course we come to new projects carrying experiences and thoughts from elsewhere. Like also Uzbekistan is a place where so many cultures were mixing across so many centuries via the Silk Roads. And sometimes when I go to look at a new culture, one of the first things you do is look at food. And I was very surprised to see that the uncontested national dish of Uzbekistan is a rice dish called plov. And I found that interesting because I wasn't normally, in desert climates, you don't normally associate that with rice. And when you start looking at this deeper, things that when people start talking to you about pilaf, pulao, paella, it actually all came from plov. But more interestingly, there is a myth that Ibn Sina, who I guess many of you in Italy know as Avicenna, the word medicine comes from him. He's the father of modern medicine. He also comes from Bukhara. The myth is that he invented plov as the recipe to cure the broken heart of a prince who could not marry the daughter of a craftsman. And everything I needed was in that sentence. One, that's wonderful that someone used their creative talents to do something to heal someone else. But there's problems with that. Like, what about the craftsman? Did he get to eat any of that plov? Today he does. What about the daughter? She's just the profession of her dad. How could we do something with the values we have in the 21st century to bring people to Uzbekistan where actually the artisan has a name, they're not just their profession, the daughter has a place where we can look at art as a form of healing in the many senses of the word. And we're all going through so many types of heartbreak. It's not just romantic, and it's one of the greatest teachers that we have. And poetry, which again, like epic poetry, has a deep history in Central Asia. It reminds us of heartbreaks of the past and how we can connect across time. And the same is with recipes, right? Especially with histories of displacement. Like, our grandmother's recipes connect us to times that perhaps we can't physically touch, but we can taste.
Extending this story about, this biennial being deeply rooted in local culture, you have also made a very bold choice to create all the artworks in the country. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? What has happened as a result of this unusual choice?
Sure. Well, I think the other thing is I think we want to give recipes about how we can do things better. And I think there's so much money that's going into shipping things all over the world where it's not actually contributing to the creation of art and culture. And something that, I guess the core reason why I agreed and I'm very excited to be a part of this project is that the foundation has been supporting artisans for like 8 years. So or even more than that. So basically, they know who, master artisans are in like kind of every corner of the country. And the kind of divides we see between the fine arts and the applied arts don't exist in Uzbekistan in the way that they exist elsewhere in the world. So, Antony has also been many, it's, someone will show a plate on the wall with the same love and care as they're showing a contemporary painting. And here in this image, for example, we're seeing the Indian artist Subodh Gupta in the atelier of a master artisan who I also believe is a contemporary artist, Abdul Wahid Bukhari. And how I think that the art world doesn't deal with this divide between fine arts and applied arts very well. I think that there's a problem with that hierarchy. So here, actually, all of the works are collaborative. All of the artists, whether you're local or international, get paid the same fee. And it's not that we have the Uzbek artists in corners, they have major ambitious projects. And so I think, the Recipes for Broken Hearts is also from like an institutional and curatorial perspective. How do we stop this kind of global biennial spectacle and actually contribute to the conditions to create great art and change the way people see problematic, or in my view, problematic hierarchies?
And Antony, did working with local materials or within traditional techniques push your practice in unexpected directions or open some new conversations? What is your experience of working in this new context of producing locally? And
well, I'm just so excited to have this opportunity in a way of learning through the culture that exists in Bukhara. I remember trying to get there in 1971. And I got north of Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan, but was stopped at the border at Faizabad, trying to get to Bukhara and Samarkand. So this is a dream, really, a very old dream of mine, to go to this place that is so extraordinary because it's connected, yes, with the east-west silk trade, but also with the north-south. So there was, incense coming from Saudi Arabia, coming through Bukhara. It was really the epicenter of the Eurasian, in a way, cross-cultural fertilization. And it's just so exciting that in the 21st century we can link with that extraordinary history, whether it's Sasanian, Achaemenid, Sogdian, or Alexandrian, in terms of this place that has illuminated the minds and hearts of so many people throughout world history. So what do we find when we go there? We find this architecture that is made of the very earth below the buildings. And yeah, it's exciting to me to be able to work in a context of another version of the Khoja Mosque, slightly smaller, which is well, I mean, there's half of it left. So it's a place which in some senses has only one leg left in history. But to use that as a place of where perhaps the context can become part of the content. And to go on from what Diana was saying, the difference between this Biennale and others is that the work will all be made there. It's not about already validated, already seen work coming from all over the world at great expense, at great, in a way, carbon cost, but about a dialogue of contemporary thinkers who think through making, coming together from very disparate cultures. And I'm going on Saturday, and we've been, like I worked with Diana on the Dhaka Art Summit, where I was asked, well, you've got to choose what are the local, from the local kind of palette of material. So it was, coir, so coconut fiber, jute, mud, or bamboo. I said, I'll take bamboo. In this case, there was no choice. Take the earth itself. Anyway, it's a learning curve. I will find out more on Saturday, but we are just beginning to make a work that hopefully will be ready by September.
There's a lot of conversation about globalization of art these days, especially fairs, biennials are cited as culprits for this, but it seems that this biennial is actually doing the opposite. It's going in the opposite direction and connecting to something that's very local, particular, culturally specific. So it's apparently achieving quite the opposite effect of many others. Gayane, because of this, I'm also curious about the long-term vision for the biennial. So launching the biennial is never just about that one single event. It's about building a platform, and in this case, it's about something even broader. What is the long-term vision behind Bukhara Biennial, and what role do you see it playing in Uzbekistan's evolving cultural landscape?
So I will give like a broader maybe answer to this question. So why it's important to be, why we decided to do biennial? So we come back to the city every 2 years at least. Why it's important to do it in Bukhara? Because Bukhara is a very special city. It's historically it's a very special city, but it's also secured by the UNESCO. So we cannot really do much in the city to develop it. But then we decided, to preserve it with this beautiful art. And at the same time, it's a really part of a global vision because we inherited from our past at least 3 historical cities protected by the UNESCO. And for us, it's in a way, it's a pioneer project, but it's also like a pattern, how we can apply it to the other cities. Because here we are, as Antony correctly said, it's a learning curve for us. It's a learning curve for our next generation, for the younger generations that is living in Uzbekistan, here with us today and seeing these changes and really are striving for the changes and would like to be a part of these changes. So it's a bigger strategy in a way that we've been working a lot with the crafts. Now we're trying to introduce contemporary art to the country. And at the same time, we're building Center for Contemporary Art, which will be launched quite soon in September, almost at the same time as Bukhara Biennial. But it also allows us to invest in our future, in the younger generation. So whichever project we're doing, in whatever city we're going, it's all about the younger generation to be present with us, to be proud of its past, and to be trying to base whichever changes we have in our roots, in our heritage.
And I'm just curious to ask, so this project is in a way connected with the educational also initiative to revive the handicrafts, to establish a system for evaluating them, to make them appealing to the younger generation, to provide some sort of context and ultimately degrees and diplomas for those who will engage in craftsmanship, design, art.
Yeah, when we were starting to work on this biennial 3 years ago, we realized that there is no master's and bachelor's degrees to be offered in Uzbekistan in the field of craft. And it was quite important for us to learn because we've seen the curve is going down, in a number of artisans. Even when you're coming from the dynasty, from this big family, you might not as well want to do it anymore, and perhaps you would like to have a more academic and classical education. So now we're working with the King's Foundation from London to really focus on education in this sphere. And from September, we will be presenting a course on traditional crafts. But also, we just introduced a course at the Westminster University in Uzbekistan, it's a branch of the London University, on creative economy. That's exactly what our president and what our country is focusing now on, bringing the creativity to the country and make the most of it.
But Gayane, can you say something about the relationship between traditional crafts and contemporary art? Because I think that you're doing
I thought you mentioned already about it, but just to go back to it, it's really important for us to bring it to the same level, and it's exactly important because, of course, we have traditional schools of art and of contemporary art, but craftsmanship was never really reaching this level of prestige in a way as artists. So for us, it's really important to kind of create this linear between the craft and the contemporary art today.
But as I understand it, that it is really important to you that there's also, as it were, a focus on and a re-energizing of art school training that, in a way, embraces the same thing. We have this long tradition of material thinking. Now let's make that available to people who want to be contemporary artists.
Exactly, and it's also about the international audience coming to Uzbekistan and learning, because there is so many traditional materials we're still using. There is huge sustainability going on in the country. Like, we're still working with all these materials. There is, for the Western country or other international countries, a lot also to learn. The reason we are opening the school with the King's Foundation, because they also want to train their artisans, their auditory and students in Uzbekistan. So it is a learning curve for us, yes.
It's the beginning of a larger dialogue and educational exchange. Talking about materials, of course, brings me to your work, because you work in physical materials like clay, and this creates certain relationships and fosters a sense of community. Could this be a model for future cross-cultural dialogue? And in what ways does this form of communication, the making, differ from the digital online interactions that we're used to normally?
I think that just our relationship with material has become commodified, just like art has become commodified, or maybe not in the same way, but in a similar way. And actually, a relationship with material is a living relationship. It is, too, in a way, the physical engagement with how substances can be manipulated, how they can be, in a way, extended, how they can be compacted, how they can be cooked. And that's what I think makes this so exciting, that this isn't an opportunity to order 50 tons of this. It's actually an opportunity to see what kind of straw, what kind of grass do you mix with this kind of clay. In the site that I've been given, the ground is going to be clay. And out of that, we're going to make these temporary blocks that will return to being clay and hopefully recycled in architecture later. And anyway, for me, it's about connecting with the living traditions of thinking through making through material. And every material has its own tradition, its own culture, its own language, which is partially to do with the quality of the material, but also to do with tradition. So there's another bigger question here, which is really, I think, very exciting to me. When I was an art student, the idea was that art develops by revolution. You have, the conceptualists who kind of turn over the abstract expressionists in the dominant hegemony of American art. But I think of art as a continuum. Art is a continual evolution. And I think there's nowhere better to make this clear than in this kind of generation, where we have such deep history of material languages evolving in time.
Fascinating. Diana, you talked about the biennial in very interesting terms. The more I hear, the more I find out that almost every aspect of it is very unique. So you said that it won't peak after its opening week, but stay alive through November. There is no VIP opening, anything like that. So I'm curious, what would a successful first edition feel like by the end, and how might it evolve from there forward?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question, but I do, I see, since I have to go to lots of biennials as a curator making biennials, there's this energy at the beginning and everyone's chasing the opening and then no one's thereafter. Our exhibition is happening in public space. People live there. That's also why we can't shut off an exhibition from people that are walking down those streets in their daily life. We very much want them to be a part of it. And I think because actually so many people in Bukhara are involved in making of these works, they're already involved, but it's this kind of word of mouth, bring your grandparents, bring your kid, call in schools from Tashkent for school visits. But also I think that this biennial can be a platform for many things. So we're having an art history symposium, bringing together young scholars of Central Asia to be able to talk about their culture from their own terms, which I think is very interesting. We're having a poetry symposium. We are having a curatorial school. We also have children's workshops, and we have chefs coming every weekend from different parts of the world to look at food in different manners. So food can be spiritual, food can be political, there's so many different aspects. Or even, for example, you'll see chili peppers as talismans all over Bukhara, but chili peppers all came from the Americas. How did they get there? And also I think that with healing heartbreak or even with cooking, time is a very key ingredient. So we'll also have certain chefs that are fermenting food across the whole route of the biennial that'll only be unveiled in the end. We'll have process-based work. So what you see when the biennial opens is not what you will see at the end, if that makes sense, in terms of the exhibition itself. But I also hope that this welcomes repeat visits, repeat questions. It's also a biennial that it's impossible to see alone. You have to see it with someone else. So hopefully new friendships. And most importantly, I think also inspiring more people to want to become artists or to engage in art on their own terms. And I will tell you right now, there are incredible emerging Uzbek artists, many of whom have never worked with a curator before, that I'm so excited to see their works come to life. And right now we're seeing this image. So a challenge of working on an entirely commissioned-based exhibition with an opening date in sites that are being restored is that we will not have photography by the time the show opens. But what we do have is these are paintings by a young Bukharian illustrator named Yunus Farmanov. And so he basically is imagining all the artist's works as they will exist in these sites. And so it's also incredible to have this exchange with a young Bukharian who knows these sites like the back of his hand, but to try to to explain what the artists are trying to do. So here on the left, you see a drawing, and the brief was to think of it as a dream because colors may change, details might change. But this is a mosaic piece by Marina Perez Simão, a Brazilian painter, and she's working with a mosaic master named Bakhtiar Babamurodov. And he usually is restoring ceramics in mosques, but here he's making an entirely new piece where the artist wants you to feel like you're walking on a sea of stars, inspired by the incredible astronomic achievements of Uzbekistan. Or here on the right, you see, kind of an imagination of what Antony's earth brick block figures might look like in this half-collapsed mosque site with a mountain made of spices by the Colombian artist Delcy Morelos rising in the background. Yeah, I guess a successful biennial is these ideas actually being realized and how people take them in and become a part of it.
For me, sorry to jump in, but for me the really exciting thing is that essentially the Bukhara Biennale is for Bukhara.
Yes.
I think it will be for the people of Bukhara to see their own culture in a way animated by these conversations. And that really is exciting. I mean, having participated in, again, to talk about Diana's previous experience in the Dhaka Art Summit, it was just so incredible. This was a show that was only on for 9 days, but nearly 600,000 people came, and most of them were local, whole families coming, like experiencing art that they'd never seen before, made in very familiar materials that they knew, but suddenly in different forms. And this, anyway, this is, I think, the biggest difference, that here is a biennale that is essentially for the community in which it finds itself. So, I'm sure that Gayane is very keen for people to come and visit. But the core of this is to talk with the place and see what can grow out of the place and the culture that is already there in the place, for the place to feel itself, for Bukhara to feel itself reanimated. And this is so, I think, well, a different idea about art, that it is actually a form of acupuncture that revitalizes the body of a community.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question about, because constant theme in this conversation is the relationship between past and present, and clearly Uzbekistan's craft tradition run deep, and your foundation has played a key role in keeping them alive. But they're also a springboard for reinvention, as we're seeing. How do you balance honoring the past with pushing the creative boundaries? What are your challenges?
Well, I see only a perspective. I don't really see much challenges. We are doing it throughout the whole country, so we are restoring, of course, Islamic heritage that we inherited in the country, but also working now a lot with the Soviet modernism, which we just opened our pavilion in Venice. And we're trying really to be engaged in all sorts of different dynamics of the country. But I think the key message for us is really to be engaged and to bring Uzbekistan to the global conversation on contemporary art, on contemporary culture. And exactly what just beautifully said Antony, it's very important for people of the city, of the country, to feel they're part of it, to part of this global conversation, and to really be able to respect their roots and to build on them.
Wonderful. I will extend this to ask you a couple of questions about Bukhara itself and architecture. Bukhara isn't just a setting, it's not just a city, it's a living force in its own right. It's streets, it's mahallas, it's soul. How, in your view, do they shape the character of the biennial?
Well, I think when I was working on the general concept of the biennial, I was, of course, inspired so much by Venice in a way that Bukhara is also consistent of Giardini and Arsenali. It's a mixture of things, and it's a walking distance from each of the architectural settlement. And for us, it was essential that we create a master plan. How does the city evolve with this such a big also project, as every 2 years we will be coming to the city, and the scale of it will be growing. So we started with a master plan a few years ago, and I see one of my mentors here, Irina Bokova, who is working with us closely on this project. We also engage with the great initiative Alif, which we just became a member of. And we're trying really to be respectful to the city as well. That's really important for us, to pay attention to the people, to be respectful to the city, but also engage in a contemporary culture of today.
Yes, that's very striking. It reminded me, while I was reading first time the description of the biennial and what you're trying to achieve, it very much reminded me of UNESCO. UNESCO will approve. It's one of the few cases where there is no intrusion into the urban and structure and monuments. And for you, Diana, since most of these artworks are staged around the city in historical monuments, can you share how specific locations were chosen and how do they function as collaborators in the exhibition narrative?
Sure. So you're seeing a few kind of sneak peeks of some of the venues, but one of the kind of first sites you'll encounter, depending on where you enter, is a suite of caravanserais. And caravanserais were kind of, like motels for the Silk Roads. Travelers from all over were passing through. One was used for tobacco trade, another was used for ceramic trade. So here, this section is very much going to be about journeys, but also heartbreak as a stop on a journey somewhere else. I should also clarify that the show is not about heartbreak. It's really about the process of moving past it. It's the transcendence that comes from that. So a lot of works, and here we have artists from all but one Central Asian country, many South Asian countries. It's also been really a pleasure. So for example, I lived in India for a long time and also in Bangladesh. The Mughal Empire came from Uzbekistan. There are so many cultural connections between South and Central Asia, and there has not been many contemporary art initiatives making these links. So you'll see a lot of those geographic and thematic links across these caravanserai sites. Then we also have a former madrasa site. But how do we learn? Sometimes we're supposed to learn from facts, but feelings are extremely important things to learn from. And so I wanted to create a space where you can learn from your feelings. And also we look now today at this field of neuroaesthetics, how beauty impacts how you feel. But Ibn Sina was thinking about that way back in the day. It didn't have the same term. So this is a place we're going to be naming the public program the House of Softness, inspired by the House of Wisdom. But how do we soften hard blows of history? How do we soften our heart after a difficult moment? But so yeah, I guess the sites carry their own history, or the mosque site or the former mosque site, which also was public housing at one point. These sites had many, many lives, which is also interesting. That site is also really about transcendence, how we come from earth, we grow, and we go back to it. And that idea, another funny etymological fact, is that the word for restaurant comes from the word to restore. So the first restaurants were in France that were providing bouillon to restore your body. And I think this is a site where we're looking at restoration of architecture, but restoration of your spiritual and social connection with the world and with other people.
Yeah. In Bukhara, every brick tells a story. So. Yeah. For your artwork, which is always placed in public spaces, it's always about the interaction with the audience. What role did Bukhara, its ancient character, how did that play into your creation?
Well, for me, it's extraordinary that the Aga Khan and UNESCO are in the process of restoring this building. And here we have, basically, the context is an archaeological site. They discovered a 14th century floor after digging some pits in the very place I was going to put the work. But this is really beautiful to me, that on the one hand you have excavation that is happening, that is revealing, in a way, hidden parts of the past, and at the same time that same context is the place in which you're trying to make a new proposition. And this is exactly, I think what makes it rich. And what do we want as artists? Well, I think we want to believe that the context is becoming part of the content. In other words, what is being what the viewer is being invited to, in a way, co-produce, which is the experience of thinking about how parts and wholes come together. I think of a brick as being a physical pixel that, in terms of hominid history, has been the unit out of which we have built the city. And we live in a time in which the city is now making us. So to think about the idea of that long history of human, you could say, cognitive evolution that has been so dependent on the city that in some way gives us shelter, but also gives us means of communication. We're living in a digital, in a cyber age, where in a way the brick has become the pixel. But it's still really, really important to go back to those places in Central Asia. I mean, I passed in my journeys back and forth to India, many times south of Kandahar, there is this amazing mud brick ruin, which is where Alexander the Great housed his elephants. It's still there, 2,000 and some years later. And for me, this dialogue with a place that has history that is a made history, that talks about, in a way, part-whole relations and the way in which we as a species, we don't have fur. We have brains that have, in a way, had to make up for not having the protection that the species with which we share the biosphere have. And we have made our, in a way, artificial clothing into cities, into forms of intelligent habitat. But anyway, to go back to a place that is the birthplace of these very things. I mean, I think of the whole of Central Asia, whether it's Mesopotamia or indeed any of what are now the stans. This is a place where these primary dialogues between Earth, between the planet that supports us and human intelligence have been worked out over millennia. And at a time of mass global division and a return to dictatorship and identity politics based on, in a way, false news, the mediafication of untruth, to go back to the idea of physical thinking in a place where that has been going on for so long seems so relevant and so urgent. Sorry.
Bravo. So from history to future, I would like to close this panel by asking a final question. How could this biennial help shift global perceptions of Central Asia from a region known for its ancient legacy to a catalyst for contemporary creativity? For you.
So, just continuing what you have said, our country was in stagnation for more than 30 years, and I think it's important to understand that we preserved so much young energy in the country, and we are just striving for the change. And we see this biennial and all the other events that are, biennial is actually the element of the bigger strategies that we hold and that we embrace. It's important for us to understand that we are also part of this global conversation, and there is a future for Uzbekistan also to stand on its roots, and to really hope for the future that we'll be embracing the culture in Uzbekistan, will be also inspiring the rest of the world, and it's really important to be bringing people in Uzbekistan to learn more about the country, but it's important what we have able to talk also on the international global platforms. So for us, it's just another opportunity to talk about our country, but also to focus all the new energies that we have in the country on culture.
Thank you very much, and I hope that everybody will visit Bukhara Biennial anytime between the 5th of September to the 20th of November, as it will be alive and happening throughout this period. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.